Hello everybody, so today we're going to be exploring an Anderson shelter, but it's no ordinary Anderson shelter, and I'll explain about that more in a minute. In terms of it's an Anderson shelter, but it's sort of misrepresented, but I'll explain more on the other side. So promise me you'll stay with me and I'll see you in a minute. Bye. Hello, how are you? Glad you could stay with me on this wonderful adventure. So it's labelled as Westerham that I've put it in the video, although it's Hosey. So if you're not familiar with Hosey Common, check out previous videos that I've made, which is the Tower in Westerham and Hosey Common Caves, which are an amazing bat preservation conservation place. Amazing, just amazing. So if anybody wants to find those videos, put them in the link below, fantastic. If not, I may have to help other people out if they want that. But for today, you have to walk past this, and it's always been a place that, because it's local to me, it's literally about 15 minutes up the road from me. It's always been a place where I've visited quite a lot. I never really thought to do a video on this, but however, in doing my research, I found out something really interesting about it, because I always assumed that it wasn't an Anderson shelter in the way that it was, but what I didn't realise was how amazing it actually is in its own right. Now let me explain to you about this. So let's just discuss this for a second. First off, it's an Anderson shelter, yes, and it's on a concrete base, which for a lot of you might be like, wow, that's really interesting, then it's got to be used as World War II. Now, the question is, not necessarily. So I need to sort of give you a little brief history lesson, but I'm not going to do one of these fanciful voiceover things. I'm just going to tell you about it. So what happened was, after World War II, Anderson shelters could be sold off, and normally they'd be sold off at about £1, which is probably about the equivalent of about 35 quid now, roughly. So for about 35 quid in modern money, you could own your very own Anderson shelter, or you could re-own it, I suppose, obviously, depending on what your preference was. And now what would happen is that farmers or landowners would normally buy these, and what they would do is they'd repurpose them into things like pig farms or sheds or disposable places. Now, what I'm trying to say to you is I don't know. We're not 100% sure that this was definitely used for World War II, that the insignificance of where this is quite illogical, really. So what you've got to try and do is you've got to try and assume that actually this was actually repurposed. Now, the best bit about this is in here. So we'll all have a look, and it's here already. There's a few. Now this is what's called a trademark Staley. Well, this is trademark Staley. Now what that is an official trademark from the owner itself. So the people who manufactured this, that was their trademark stamp basically, and there's all different ones. This one's trademark Staley, S-C-A-L-E-Y, and they're all over this. So this was from the same company who manufactured this one. So in essence, that's good. So again, we're sort of eliminating the obvious. We're sort of saying, okay, right, well, that's good. So now we know then that that's okay. So in sequence, everything's from the same manufacturer. So we know that whoever bought this, whoever owned this, it still could be an air raid shelter, however, or an Anderson shelter proper. However, where we are, we're in Hosey Common, and to know the geography and topography of it, the closest thing that would be relevant to the Anderson shelter would be the old National School. Now, from memory, that was a mixed school, and then I think it went off into a boys' school. Now, I could be terribly wrong on that, because I don't know the significance of that too much. The only thing that I do know is that the stones that were used from the quarrying mine network from hosted common caves. But what I found out is that this is more than likely not used as an Anderson shelter, and this was more used for storage. And another clue which might or may not give you an indicator of that, if you know what an Anderson shelter looks like, you're quite familiar with it. The first thing you'll notice is that this one is sort of abnormally longer than most. So what you'd normally expect with an Anderson shelter, or a size of Anderson shelter, is it's relatively quite small. So in fact it's probably at least about half the length of this on average. Doesn't necessarily mean you can't build them all up together to make a big Anderson shelter, but just general purpose, okay, fine. Well, where's the nearest houses? Like we said before, well, the national school's a walk not too far away, but I can't remember whether that was still active at the time of World War II. And then you've got a few sort of private houses over there, but apart from that, nothing. Is it? So let's have a look. Also, that sort of gives us clues or indicators. So, is the ground buttressed up against it? No. Now, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that an Anderson shelter isn't. There are records of Anderson shelters that are literally in people's back gardens that have just been turfed up with earth. Now, to give you a good example of what I mean by this, you need to go back and you need to check out the Anderson shelter that I found out by sheer fluke in Sheerness. Look at that one, because it's in actually, although it's in bad condition, it's also in a sort of interesting condition where it gives you a really good idea of what you're trying to look for. And the other thing which goes along with that is this. Now, on a standard Anderson shelter, what you'd have is you'd have sheets covering this. So you'd have another bit of sheet working here, corrugated iron here with the entrance. So you'd be looking through a sort of squared entrance, but there'd be a sheet that would be protecting that, and it would also be on the other side. So again, it sort of makes me wonder, was this actually a Anderson shelter in the truest sense of the word? Now, I need to clarify for everybody, I'm not a pure true historian, I just have a passion for history. I fully admit that this one is open to conjecture. The most interesting information that I found on it suggests that it wasn't used in an Anderson shelter, and that this was probably bought and used as just some storage. And it makes sense more than anything for the location of where we are, that the landowner, whoever decided to purchase this, put it here. The interesting thing, however, that sort of is slightly different, however, is this is on a concrete base, as I've sort of said before. And the other thing is that, I mean, if you didn't know any better, you would say that that is a World War II functioning Anderson shelter. But so you've seen the trademarks. Let's actually just walk in, but I want to show you. Let's have a look on top first. I mean, it's seen better days. It's totally seen better days. This log, the fact that it shows how strong that is, because it's a very thick log resting on top of that, and it's managed to keep it just about. So, you know, you think they're slightly flimsy, but they're not as flimsy as you think. And we need to look on top, because we like looking at detail here on Phoenix History, don't we? So we're looking at the rivets that help basically create this lattice work. So what's happened is that they've placed the second sheet on top, pinned it down, and that's basically what's happened. Now there's about 7 sheets here, 7 individual sheets that have sort of gone oval. But let's have a look inside. I mean, you can see it's nothing special, but these trademark studies are so rare. The actual maker's marks of the manufacturer's marks, keep getting that wrong, but again, very interesting. You'd normally expect it reinforced with some sort of earthwork or groundwork as well to make it, but again, the fact of how good condition this is, if it was in fully use, you'd expect to see an entranceway. You'd expect to see the entrance sheeting, which you can't see on both. Now, because that's not there, that makes it suspect to me, thinking that this was ever used fully as an Anderson shelter again. So, you know, make up your own mind. Either way, there's a bit of history with the manufacturer's mark in there. I mean, that in itself is absolutely extraordinary. Incredible. And the fact that it's supporting this tree is even more amazing, really. You can see where it's sort of just started to split. And what either way, what they've done is that they've... there's a bit of concrete there. Either way, you can see, if I take you right down, that they've solidly placed this in there. Well, they've got a concrete base. The interesting thing is that that's split off, so it doesn't look like it's absolutely moulded into the concrete. Hard to tell, actually. I might have to look around and see if that's actually properly in. Well, the best way to do it actually is to go inside. Now, it looks like it's purely resting on that. Yeah, look, you can see where there's a few, although they're rust holes, there's actually a few holes there. So maybe it was cemented in and just over time it started to come away. But look, there's all these trademark, look, manufacturer's marks, amazing. I'll show you this one again because this one's in better light. Trademark Staley. They would have sold these, isn't that incredible? Absolutely amazing. So there you go. Absolutely amazing. So, I mean, for the purpose of this video, we're going to call it Westerham Anderson Shelter, because it is technically an Anderson Shelter. It was originally an Anderson Shelter, whether it was purposely placed here as an Anderson Shelter or not. But like I said, however, I did some research and they reckon that it would have been bought by the farmer or the landowner around Hosey Common, and it had been placed here for some storage. Which, if I was a gambling man, you know, I'd probably err towards that. And like I said, the two things that make me think that is that there's no entrance sheet there, there's no panelling that you'd normally see on either end with a square thing, which is in the Sheerness one, you could see there was corners on opposite side and I had to sort of crawl into. So that's a big giveaway. Yeah, that could have been moved, but if it hadn't been, then it would have been in the concrete. I can't see any sort of marker that's telling me that there would have been anything like that here. But either way, it's quite weird, isn't it? I mean, you imagine the amount of people who've probably come here, think there's an Anderson Shelter, which they're right about, but when they go in, they don't realise that there's a maker's mark on it, which makes it just so much more personal. And the fact that the maker's marks are consistent on every sheet, so you can see it was just bought. It was just bought from either one Anderson Shelter or possibly a couple of Anderson Shelters or disused ones that they bought up. And like I said, back then it was only £1 to buy them, which is again in modern money now. I'll give you an Anderson Shelter for about 35 quid if you want one. But it's still here. You know, it's still here. And surely that's the most amazing thing. And hopefully, you know, the information that I've given you will make you reflect on it and go, wow, okay, was this actually originally used for an Anderson Shelter? You never know. There might be people out there who live in Hosey and Westerham Way, and they might be like, do you know what? I was in here in World War, you know, I know my granddad or whoever was in here during World War II, and like the only thing that I can surmise is that there was a national school up there, but I couldn't find out the dates as to when that had actually finished. There's a couple of houses, but in the very literal vicinity, no, I mean, and even if it was part of the school, it's still quite small. I mean, you're talking at best a very cosy 10 people could fit in that. Cosy. And that's probably children, maybe a few more, maybe about 12. So, yeah, interesting. Should we walk through it one more time? Let's do that, come on. Because you can see, look, over time, this will eventually Time will have it eventually. But this concrete base, solid, rock solid this is. And then you can see these corrugated sheets with the bolts. See, them bolts make me question. And I know it's a little bit dark in here, I do apologise, but it's only a little bit dark. You know, there's no sort of indication of any benches or anything that you might want to make home and comfort for it. So yeah, and again, you know, it's not buried. It doesn't have to be buried like we said before, but there's no indication that this one was sort of buried to help if there was bombs falling, that you'd have the natural turf or the natural land protecting it as a sort of reinforcement. So yeah, but how amazing. Blabbed on too long, I do apologise everybody, but it is an amazing bit of history that I neglected to do for a very long time. And I'm finally here. It's probably because lockdown's given me the excuse to do it, so there you go. Shall I stay? Shall I stay in here? Shall I do it like here? Look. Right, so any more words of Phoenix history? Thank you as always for watching. Feel free to spread the word of the channel. Feel free to spread the video. And much love to all of you out there. I'll see y'all very soon. And because history matters, especially look at this. How cool is this? What a great reminder. Take care everybody. Bye for now. Kapow!